In this Code 0 to 20, we're going to be taking a look at code navigation and how you can efficiently navigate through your project. This will touch on things such as Quick Open, which lets you navigate between files in your project, navigating between symbols in your current file or searching for symbols in your current project, jumping to the definition of a function or to a type, for example, as well as jumping to specific line numbers and jumping between brackets. This video is going to cover a range of tips and tricks, so everything from very basics if you're just getting started with VS Code to more advanced settings and configuration options that you might not be aware of even if you've been using VS Code for a few years. I'm going to be using TypeScript for this demo, but keep in mind that many of these features are language independent. If you are using a more specific language like Python or C# or Java or one of those, you can also install the IntelliSense extensions for those languages, so you get support for more advanced language features like go to definition and other things that I'll be demonstrating with TypeScript in this video. By the end of this video, hopefully you'll have learned a few new techniques for navigating through your project quickly and efficiently. So let's get started. Now the first technique we're going to look at is Quick Open, which lets you quickly jump between different files in your project. This is a really core part of VS Code, and it can really improve your workflow. If you're coming from another editor, you might be used to opening files using the Explorer and browsing through the Explorer to find the specific file that you're interested in, but oftentimes using Quick Open can be much faster. You only need to know the general file name that you're actually going to, and then you can use Quick Open to go and jump to it without having to know where it's actually located in your project structure. Now to open Quick Open, all you have to do is press Control-P or Command-P. And this will open a quick input box at the top of the screen. You can see that I have an input to type the file name that I actually want to jump to, and then a list of recently opened files here. So if I wanted to just jump to one of my recently opened files, all I have to do is scroll through this list. And then as soon as I find the file that I'm interested in, I can just go and click on it. So let's say I was interested in this format file here, which is one that I've recently opened. I could just click on this here, and you can see it's now let me go and open this file here. Now I could also use the keyboard for this. So if I open Quick Open again with Control-P or Command-P, I can scroll through the list of recently opened files, find the one that I'm interested in, such as test code editor here, and then press Enter to actually go and open it. So again, I was just using the arrow keys and then press Enter to actually select this. So that's how you can use Quick Open for your recently opened files, but the real value of Quick Open is that you can actually go and search through all of the file names in your project to find a specific file that you're interested in. So I'm going to close these two files here, and now I'm going to open Quick Open again with Control-P or Command-P, and let's say we're interested in files that are related to refactoring in some way. I'm just going to type in refactor. And now you can see a list of files that have the word refactor somewhere in their name. So the two at the top here have exact matches. We have a file called refactor.ts and then another file called learn more about refactorings. You can see that it's highlighting the match term somewhere in there. And then below that is a list of files that are more fuzzy matches. So in this case, you can see that the word refactor is split up here. And then as we look through the list, you can see other cases where the letters that make up refactor are split up, but they're not exact matches. So Quick Open is showing us all the files in my current project that have refactor or the sequence of letters that make up refactor somewhere in their name. In this case, I'm interested in this top file here, and I can just press Enter to go and open it. So I'll just say Enter here. Now, one of the cool things about Quick Open is you don't need to even remember the exact file name that you want to jump to. So if I open Quick Open again with Control-P or Command-P, and I type in something like main document, you can see that just by typing in these two words, it's gone and found all of the files that have main and then document somewhere in their file name. So I didn't need to remember the exact name of this file. It's main thread documents here, for example. I can just go and scroll through this file list and find the one that I'm interested in and then press Enter to go and open that file. Now let's say there are multiple files all with the same name in your project. So if I open Quick Open here and then search for like package.json, for example, you can see that there are multiple matches and these files all have the same name. Over to the right here, you can actually see a relative path. So this is the project relative path to each of these files. So you can identify which each of these files actually are. You can just scroll through this list, find the one that I'm interested in, and then either click on it or press Enter with it selected, and it'll go and open the correct file here. Now I could also use this to my advantage. So let's say that I was going to search for a package.json file, and I only wanted the package.json files under a specific extension. So I'm going to go and open the package.json, the Quick Open again here. I'm going to type in git package.json, because I know I'm looking in a Git folder. You can see that now it's searching and it's highlighting both the search term that I had, so package.json here, as well as matching on the folder name. So it's only looking under the Git folder here for files that are called package.json. So in all of these cases, it's found things under the Git folder with the name package.json somewhere in there. And we've really narrowed down the list versus before, where for just searching for package.json in general, it was showing all of the files named package.json instead of filtering based on the folder where things are contained. Now, this fuzzy filtering is also something you can start taking advantage of as you learn more about Quick Open and as you get more used to it. So for example, you can do things like if you remember that the first letters of a file name that is camel cased, you can type in something like the first letters here. So I could do something like TCE, and this would bring up test code editor. So it's using the first letters of each of these matches here, and I could go and select this from the list. And you can even type in more fuzzy matches. So if I wanted to find all of the PNG files in my project, I can just go and open QuickOpen and say .png. And now it's going to show me a list of PNG files or all files that are ending with .png here. So QuickOpen is really flexible, and once you get used to the fuzzy matching, you can start leveraging the fuzzy matching to your benefit as well. Now, there are also a few tricks you can use with QuickOpen to open files in different ways. So I'm going to go and clean up the open files that I have here. So I'll just say close all to get rid of all of these files. Now I'm going to open QuickOpen again, and I'm going to type in format. So you can see I have a list of files related to formatting. And let's say that I want to open multiple files from this list. Rather than first selecting one and then opening QuickOpen again and then selecting the next one, instead I can scroll through the list to find the first file I want to open and then hit the right arrow key. And you can see that it's gone and opened the file in the background, but the QuickOpen list here is still open. So I can go continue through the list and then either hit the right arrow key to open that file as well. So let's say I wanted to open this formatting file. I'll hit right arrow key here. And now it's gone and opened that file as well. And then I'll go and find a third file that I want to open. And let's say I'm done at this point. I could just hit enter to go and accept the list here. So by hitting right arrow key, you keep the existing QuickOpen open, and you can continue interacting with a list, and you can continue hitting right arrow to open multiple files in the background. And then as soon as you're done, you can either press escape to close the QuickOpen or accept the last file using enter or by clicking on the file entry. So that right arrow key can be really helpful if you ever need to open multiple files from the QuickOpen widget. Another neat trick is that you can open files to the side of the current editor. So again, by default, we're seeing here that QuickOpen opens files in the current editor group. But let's go and open QuickOpen again, and I'll go back and do format here. And let's say I want to open this formatted editing file next to the current editor. All I have to do is hold down Control and then either click on this entry or press return to accept and go open this file. And when I do this, you can see that that file has been opened to the side. So instead of going into the current editor group, it has created a new editor group to the side of the first one, and we now have this open to the side. I could do this again. So if I open QuickOpen here, I'm focused on the second editor group, and let's go and open main thread document. I'll hold down Control here and then press return. And you can see it's now opened a third editor group. So by holding down Control, when you're actually selecting one of the files from QuickOpen, instead of opening that file in the current editor group, it will instead open that file to the side in a new editor group. Now let's look at some of the ways that you can navigate within a file. We'll start with some generic commands which work across any language before moving on to commands like go to definition, which do require IntelliSense support. The go to line command lets you jump to a specific line and even a specific column within the current file. There are a few different ways to trigger it, but probably the easiest is using the keyboard shortcut. So I can just say Control G here, and that will trigger the go to line command. Now up at the top of the screen, you can see that it's asking me for the line number. It looks sort of like the QuickOpen here, and all I have to do is type in the line number that I want to jump to. So I'll just type in 100, and VS Code will preview line 100 here. To actually jump to this line, I just have to press enter, and now VS Code will go and position the cursor at line 100. So I can just type in whatever line I'm interested in using Control G here, so I could go to line 20 again, and just jump through the file like that. Now let's say as you're using the go to line command, you realize that you don't actually want to navigate there. So I'll open go to line with Control G here again, and then type in 200. And let's say I see line 200 here, and then I realize, hey, I actually don't want to jump there right now. All I have to do is press escape, and VS Code will go back, and my cursor is still at line 20. So if you press escape, VS Code will not go and navigate to that line. If you press enter, VS Code will jump to that line instead. Now when you run go to line, so I'll just say Control G here, VS Code will actually tell you the total number of lines in the file. So if I wanted to go to the last line in the file, I can see that there are 372 lines in the file. So I could type in 372 here, but it could be quite a lot of typing for a longer file, which might have thousands of lines. So you can actually use negative offsets in this case. So instead of typing in 372, let me just go back here. All I have to do is type in -1. And now VS Code will go to the last line of the file. I could type in something like -20 if I wanted to go to 20 lines from the end of the file. So you can use these negative offsets here to navigate through the file and not have to think about the specific line number that you actually want to navigate to. Now you can also use the go to line command to navigate to a specific column. So if I again press Control G here, and then type in let's say I'll go to line 137, which I know is quite a long line here. And let's say that I wanted to navigate to a specific column position on this line. So I can see here's line 137. And let's say I want to go to the 50th character on this line. All I have to do is type a colon here, and then I enter the column that I want to go to. So I'll say 50. And now when I press enter, VS Code will jump to the specific column position that I typed in here. So again, it has placed my cursor at the column 50 here instead of placing it at the beginning like go to line normally would. As I mentioned at the start, there are a few different ways to trigger the go to line command. I like using the keyboard shortcut, but you can also trigger it from the command palette. So if I open the command palette with Control-Shift-P or Command-Shift-P, I can say go to line, and you can see I have the go to line or column command here, and this will take me to the same UI. So I'll just exit out of that. I can also click on the current editor selection status bar item. So if I look down here at my status bar, I want to make sure that I have I'll just right click in this, and I'll make sure I have the editor selection item here enabled. This will show where my current cursor position is. And now if I actually click on this, you can see that it's opened the go to line, same interface here, and I can type the line that I want to jump to. Another neat trick is that you can actually use Quick Open to open a file at a specific line. So if I again open Quick Open with Control-P or Command-P, then type in a file I'm interested in, such as format here. Now if I type a colon and then the line number I want to jump to, so I'll say :100 and then press enter, you can see that it's opened the format file here and automatically jumped to line 100. So I can enter the line number and even the column number if I wanted to directly into the Quick Open view when opening that file. The go back and go forward commands let you navigate through previous locations that you visited in VS Code. You can kind of think of them as being similar to the forward and back buttons in your browser. Here, for example, you can see that my cursor is currently on line 28. And let's say that I use the go to line command to jump down to line 100. So I'll say Control-G here, type in 100, and then press enter. Now I've jumped down to line 100. Now let's say that I actually want to jump back to where my cursor was before. Now instead of triggering go to line and typing in 28 in this case, I can use the go back to command. So I'm going to just open the command palette with Control-Shift-P or Command-Shift-P, go back, and you can see I have the go back command here. It also has a default key binding, which is Control-, and when I run this, VS Code will navigate to my previous cursor location. Now this also works across files. So if I go and open Quick Open with Control-P or Command-P, and let's just go and pick a random file here. So I'll go to code action. And now let's say that I realize I want to go back to my previous file. I can just use the go back command. Again, that is bound to Control- by default. And now VS Code will jump to my previous file and my previous cursor location. Now the go forward command, as you might expect, goes in reverse. So it navigates forward through the history after you've used the go back command. Now I can just open the command palette again with Control-Shift-P or Command-Shift-P and say go forward. You can see that the default key binding for this is Control-Shift-. And if I run the go forward command, now VS Code will jump into the code action command here. So you can use the go back and go forward commands to jump between previous locations that you visited. Now, one of the problems with the go back command is that there can often be a lot of extra entries in the history that you're navigating through. So pretty much anytime you click in a file and move your cursor around, anytime you navigate between files, those actions are going to create extra history entries that you then have to navigate back through. Oftentimes, though, you're really only interested in the last place where you're making code changes in a file. And that's where the go to last edit location command can be really useful. So say, for example, I go and I make a code change here. So I'll just go and add an extra space, for example. And now I'm going to go click through this file here. So I'll make a few clicks in this file, open a few other files. And now let's say I want to go to the previous location where I was working on code. If I use the normal go back command, it's actually going to start navigating through these files, and I'll have to do a number of steps. So if I just use the normal go back with Control- here, you can see it's jumped to the formatting file here. Now it's jumping within the bracket matching file, but I'm still not back to my original location. That's where the go to last edit location command can be really useful. So I'm going to go and open the command palette with Control-Shift-P or Command-Shift-P and say go to last. And I want the go to last edit location command here. You can see the default key binding for it. And if I run this, it'll actually jump to the last location where I actually changed the code. It skipped through all the places where we're just navigating through code to go to the place where we actually made a code change. Another file navigation command that you can use is the go to bracket command. Again, this is another command that does not require language-specific IntelliSense. It should work in most languages. And what it does is it allows you to jump between two brackets. This could be things like curly braces in a language like JavaScript. It could be parentheses for a function call, for example. It could be square brackets for defining an array. Whatever your language defines as brackets, the go to bracket command should jump between the two of them. And all it requires is basic bracket matching support. So here in this file, for example, you can see that when I place my cursor on the opening curly brace here, VS Code can highlight the closing curly brace, and that's how we know that the go to bracket command will be enabled. Now, again, there are a few different ways to run the go to bracket command, but I like using the keyboard shortcut here. If you want, you can actually run this directly from the command palette. So if I open the command palette with Control-Shift-P or Command-Shift-P, and then say go to bracket, notice that my cursor started on the opening bracket here. When I run go to bracket, it will go and jump to the closing bracket. Again, I like using the keyboard shortcut though. On Windows, that is Control-Shift-backslash. On Mac, it is Command-Shift-backslash, and that's much quicker than going and opening the command palette. So if I just press Control-Shift-backslash or Command-Shift-backslash, I can jump between these two brackets. So again, my cursor is on the closing bracket down here. As soon as I press Command-Shift-backslash or Control-Shift-backslash, it'll jump to the opening one. I can just jump between those two using the go to bracket command like that. Now, the go to bracket command does not require that your cursor is on one of the brackets to be used. So if I place my cursor inside of the conditional here and then use the go to bracket command, it will first jump to the closing bracket, which in this case is the closing parenthesis here. And then if I use go to bracket again, it'll jump to the opening parenthesis. So again, I can use this to jump between brackets even if my cursor is not actually on any brackets. And this is especially helpful. Say my cursor was in here in the run function, for example. When I press go to bracket, it will actually jump to the closing part of this method. And then I can jump to the opening bracket of this method as well, just using that. So I can jump between these two curly braces, and I didn't have to think about actually getting my cursor onto one of those braces before running the command. Now we're going to start looking at some commands which do require rich IntelliSense support. Out of the box, many of these commands will work in JavaScript and TypeScript with VS Code. Most of them will also work in CSS and HTML. But if you're working in a language like Python, JavaScript, C#, C++, then you'll need to make sure that you install the specific extensions that do provide IntelliSense for those languages. We'll start with the document symbol commands, and there are a number of different ways that you can use document symbols in VS Code, but first we'll use the go to symbol command. Now this command lets you view and then navigate between different symbols in the current editor. To trigger it, first I'm going to open the command palette with Control-Shift-P or Command-Shift-P and say go to symbol, and I want the go to symbol in editor command here. And if I actually go and I run this, you can see that I have a list of symbols in the current file. So this would be things like classes, this would be methods, functions, any general symbols that are defined in this current file are going to be listed here. Now each of these symbols is identified by the name itself, and then a little symbol over here, which is indicating the type of each of these symbols. We can just scroll through the list here to actually view all of these symbols in the current file. Now, if I wanted to, I could start using the arrow keys here to actually navigate through these symbols as well. And you can see as soon as I go and I select one, such as the constructor here for the jump to bracket action, it is actually highlighting the constructor definition in the file. If I go down to ID, you can see it's highlighting the definition of ID here in the constructor as well. So I can actually use the arrow keys to navigate through here. And if I want to jump to any of these, all I have to do is press enter. So it works much like the quick open or the go to line command did before. So I'll just press enter here. Now it's actually gone and navigated to the specific symbol that I had open. Now, instead of going through the command palette to open the go to symbol view, I could also use the keyboard shortcut. So the default keyboard shortcut is Control-Shift-P or Control-Shift-O on Windows or Command-Shift-O on Mac. So I'll say Control-Shift-O or Command-Shift-O, and you can see that I have the same symbol navigation view here, and I can just look through the entire symbol list. Now, this symbol list might be a little overwhelming in larger files, so you can also start typing to filter things down. Let's say that I was interested in symbols that contain the word bracket somewhere in them. I can just type bracket here. And now you can see that VS Code has gone and filtered down this list and is only showing the symbols that contain the word bracket somewhere in their name. And I can just scroll through this list. It's been restricted down to 26 instead of the over 100 symbols we had before. I can scroll through this list until I find something that I'm interested in. So we'll go to bracket data here, for example, which is a constant. And I'll just press enter to actually go and jump to the definition of this. Now, just like Quick Open, the Go to Symbol view also supports fuzzy matching. So if I trigger the Go to Symbol command with Control-Shift-O or Command-Shift-O, and then let's say I just typed in JT, for example, you can see it's gone and highlighted the word jump to bracket action. So the class jump to bracket action here, just by using the first two letters that were matched in that word. So I don't even have to know the exact word I'm interested in. If I just was looking for anything that contained action somewhere in the name, I could just type action here, and you can see it's matching the two classes that have action in the name here. And then below that, we have a bunch of more fuzzy matches where the letters for action appear somewhere in the name. Now, there are also a few tricks you can use with the Go to Symbol view. So if I open Go to Symbol with Control-Shift-O or Command-Shift-O, and let's say I was interested in this class here, so jump to bracket action, but I actually want to see that class to the side of my current code that I was working on before, I can either hold down Control and then click on this or press Return, or I can click on the little symbol over here, and then it will go and open that same file to on the symbol that I selected to the side of the file that I was on before. If I then switch back over to the file here, you can see that my cursor is in the original location. So you can quickly open a file at a specific symbol to the side of your current editor by holding down Control or clicking on that little symbol in the Go to Symbol view. And now you have two copies of this file open, with one gone and focused on the symbol that you were interested in. If you want to, you can also sort the symbols by their type. So if I open the Go to Symbol view here, and then I type a colon, You can see that VS Code is now grouping the symbols by the type here. So you can see that all of the classes are grouped together. Normally, these would all be sorted by their position in the file instead, or by their relevancy if you've typed any matching terms in. But here you can see that they've all been grouped by their types here. So we have functions, methods, everything has now been grouped together, and we can navigate through the file this way. And if I start typing things, like bracket here, for example, you can see that the grouping is still applying here, even when we're filtering down the list. So again, to get the grouping, all I had to do was type a colon, and then I could type in further terms if I want to filter down the list that way. You can also combine go to symbol with quick open. So here I'm going to open quick open with Control P or Command P, and I'll go and say format here. And now let's say I want to jump to a specific symbol in one of the files that I found here. So I'll go and actually let's go and select the formatting file here. At this stage, all I'm going to do is type in an @ sign. And you can see that now VS Code has opened this file and it is showing the symbols in the current file here. So again, I was in quick open before, and just by typing that @ sign, now I'm able to jump to a specific symbol in this project. So I can either scroll through this list, or I could even just start typing to filter this down and then jump to a specific symbol in one of the files. And this was all just from quick open. So if I just press enter here, you can see it's gone and jumped to the file definition within this file directly from quick open. Now, one of the other ways to view symbols in the current file is the outline view. And the outline view has the advantage of always being visible. So you can continue working on your file and then also reference all of the symbols in the file and use the outline view for navigation. To view the outline view, first I'm going to go over to the Explorer entry in the activity bar over here, expand the Explorer view, and then I'm going to expand the outline view within the Explorer. So I'm going to go down here, expand outline. If you're not seeing an outline section, just right click in the top of the Explorer here and make sure that outline is checked so that the outline view is enabled and actually showing, and then you can go and expand it. And you can see here that the outline view is displaying the same symbol information as the go to symbol view. It is displaying it as a tree instead of as a flat list. So if I have a class, for example, like jump to bracket action, it is going to show the jump to bracket action class at the top of the file and then the constructor below it. And I can interact with this tree, so I could collapse the class down. I could go and jump to its children if I wanted to. So I can jump to the constructor here. When I double click on one of the entries in the list, it will actually place my cursor there. So I double clicked on constructor here and you can see my cursor is jumped there. If I just go and use the arrow keys to navigate through the outline view, I can press enter to jump there as well. And I can just see the entire representation of this file in the outline view here with this nice tree structure. Now again, the advantage of the outline view over the go to symbol view is that it is always going to be visible. So I can continue working on the file here. I have the outline always visible to the left. As soon as I open another file, so let's go to formatting, for example, the outline will be updated based on whether a file is focused. So this outline is always going to be visible, and I can always reference all of these symbols in the file and quickly navigate between them. The outline view also supports filtering. So let's say that I was looking for a specific symbol in the outline view. I could just go and focus on the outline view first and then start typing. So I'll say bracket here. And up in the top right corner, you can see that VS Code is showing the symbol that I typed in. So in this case, I typed in bracket as the search term. It is now going to highlight all of the symbols that have bracket occurring somewhere in them in the outline view. And you can see that it's narrowed down the list here to only show the symbols that have bracket somewhere in their name. So now I've filtered things down. If I want to clear this search, I can just press escape. And now VS Code is back to showing the normal outline view. So I can use filtering in the outline view as well to narrow things down. Now, one quick note with filtering, so I'll do the same search again, is that you can actually change how the filtering is working here. So by default, VS Code will filter down this list so that it is only showing symbols that have brackets somewhere in their name, as well as any of the parent symbols in the case of like select bracket here. But if I want to, I can just go and hover over the search text here in the top right corner, and then go and click on this little icon here. And now instead of filtering down the list, VS Code will instead just highlight the symbols that have bracket occurring somewhere in their name. So you can see that now symbols like dark and light, those ones are not being filtered out, but VS Code is still doing the highlighting of the search term here. I could also go and hover over the little search term in the right corner and then click the X icon to stop the filtering. You can also change the behavior of the outline view in a few different ways. One of the useful settings I find is using the follow cursor setting. So if I go to the outline view here and then go to the ... here, I can actually configure the outline view. And if I say follow cursor, now the outline view will highlight and focus wherever my cursor currently is. So I'm going to go and let's just find the brackets data class here. As soon as I click into here, you can see my cursor is on position. Now the outline view is gone in highlighted position. And as I move my cursor around, you can see that the outline view is updating based on wherever my cursor actually is. So I can just move through the code like this. If I click down on a symbol like this down here, you can see I'm inside the map callback now. So now the outline view is going to automatically track wherever my cursor is actually in this current file. I can also configure how the outline view is sorting symbols in the file. So if I go back in here, I'm going to disable follow cursor for now. But you can see that right now my outline view is sorting by position. So if I scroll up to the top of the outline view and click on the first entry in the list, you can see it is the first symbol that is occurring in the file. So the outline view is sorting based on where the symbols are actually occurring in the file and showing the ones at the start of the file at the top of the outline view. Now I can also sort based on the symbol type or based on the symbol name itself. So if I click on the ... here, I'm going to go and change to sort by name instead. And now VS Code will sort all of these symbols alphabetically. So you can see bracket matching controller is showing up here first. You can go and collapse that down. Then we have brackets data after that. So now it is sorting by name instead. If I instead change it to sort by symbol type, which would be sort by category here, you can see that now it is grouping together all of the classes at the top of the file. So bracket matching controller, brackets data, jump to bracket action. It is grouping together all of the classes. And then as we go down here, you can see it all have functions, constants, and other things that are grouped below that. So we can use these different options to configure how the outline view is actually being sorted. I'm going to go back and change this to sort by position. You can also use settings for more advanced customization of the outline view. So I'm going to open up my user settings here with Control comma or Command comma on Mac, and then I'll just type in outline here. And you can see now that I have a bunch of settings related to outline. So for example, I could disable icons if I do not like having the icons shown next to the symbols. I could go and disable the problem colors. And to just explain what that is, if I go back to the bracket matching file here, and then say introduce a syntax error, so I'll just introduce a syntax error here. You can see that the outline view, the symbol names are actually being highlighted in red, and that is indicating that within this symbol, there is an error that is occurring. If I did not want that to be enabled, I could go to the settings here and say, no, I do not want the outline problem colors to be enabled. Now, when I go back here, you can see that the errors are still showing here, but the symbol itself is no longer being highlighted in red. I'll just go and re-enable that. And as we scroll through this list, I'm not going to look at all of these, but one of the useful ones is that you can go through the outline and control specifically what is going to be shown in here. So if we wanted to get rid of things like booleans or classes or constants or constructors or any of those type of things, I could go through and check what I actually want to have shown in the outline view. So I'm going to just disable constructors, for example. Now when we switch back to the bracket matching file here, you can see that the jump to bracket action no longer has its constructor being displayed here. So we could just go through this list and configure what we want to be disabled and not show up in the outline view here. The final way that you can interact with document symbols is the breadcrumbs. And the breadcrumbs here are shown at the top of the editor. And they're slightly different than the other two in that they have other uses as well. So for example, the breadcrumbs will always show your current location in the file, and that is actually their primary use case. However, you can also navigate through symbols and filter down symbols using the breadcrumbs view as well. So as I mentioned, the primary use case of the breadcrumbs view is actually to show your current location in the file. So you can see that my cursor is currently here inside of the constructor. And if we look up at the breadcrumbs view here, you can see that sure enough, it is displaying the current cursor location. So inside of the constructor, which is itself inside of the jump to bracket action class here. And then we're inside of the file here, so bracket matching. And you can see the entire file path after that. So we can see the entire file path starting from the root of the project down to the file, down to the symbol that we're actually in within that file. And as I navigate through the file here and move my cursor around, you can see that the breadcrumbs view is going to automatically be updated based on wherever my cursor is. So as I move into this run method, for example, the last entry is now going to say run over here. So the breadcrumbs view are a little bit different in that way. That is actually their primary use case, I would say, but you can still use the breadcrumbs view to actually navigate through things in the file. So if I wanted to, I could just click on the entry here. So run, for example. And now I have a list of all of these symbols in the file. And again, this is sort of similar to the outline view. So we have a tree-based view here. I can go through and navigate through this using the arrow keys if I want to. So let's go to the select bracket action class here. I can expand this to see its children. And then I can click on one of these if I want to actually navigate to it. So I've navigated to the constructor down here. So I get a very similar view to the outline view just by clicking on one of the breadcrumb entries here. I can also click on this one if I wanted to and just navigate through things using the arrow keys or by clicking around and expanding things like this. Now you can also use this little breadcrumbs view to filter down the symbol list. So if I have the symbol list open here, if I just start typing, so I'll say bracket, you can see I get that same filtering that was shown in the outline view. It is also showing in the breadcrumbs view here. Now by default, you can see that it's only highlighting the match symbol. So you can see it's highlighting in orange here, the match symbols in this tree. But if I go and I hover over the little filter up here and change it to instead filter down by clicking on the 3 bars here, you can see that now it is actually going to filter out all of these symbols that do not match or that do not contain the word bracket somewhere in there. If I want to get rid of this filtering, I can just press escape or go and click on the little X in the filter up here at the top right. And now you can see I have the full symbol list again. So again, I can just go into the breadcrumbs view here and filter down just by typing. Now there is also a keyboard shortcut that you can use to open that breadcrumbs view that is bound to Control-Shift-Period or Command-Shift-Period on Mac. So if I just press Control-Shift-Period or Command-Shift-Period, you can see that it will go and open the symbol list. Then you can start typing. You can do whatever you want. So you do not actually have to go and click on things there. You can also use the keyboard shortcut to open the breadcrumbs view that way. Now, another neat thing about the breadcrumbs view is that you can also interact with these other sections of the path. So if, for example, I go and I click on the bracket matching file name here, if I click on this, I can actually navigate between the different files here. So I have a list of all of the files. You can see that I also have the test folder here, so I could expand this if I wanted to. And if I wanted to open this bracket matching test, I could just click on this entry inside of the breadcrumbs view here, and now it's actually gone and opened that file. I could do that with any of the path segments leading up to the current file. So if I go over here to like contrib, for example, I can just browse through things over here. I can start typing to filter things down. So if I say editor, for example, it's gone and filtered things down here. So I can use the breadcrumbs view to interact with any of the different parts of the symbol path, from the file sections themselves over on the left-hand side to the actual symbols in my current file. Now, there are also a few ways that you can configure the breadcrumbs view and customize it. I'm going to open up my settings with Control comma or Command comma on Mac, and then just type in breadcrumbs here. And I want all of the breadcrumb settings. Let me scroll up to the top here. And the first setting that you can do is you could actually disable the breadcrumbs if you find them getting in the way. So you can see breadcrumbs are enabled by default. If I go and uncheck this though, you can see that the breadcrumbs will no longer be displayed at the top of the file. I'm going to turn breadcrumbs back on. You could also control what part of the breadcrumbs are going to be shown. So if I do not want the file path to be shown, I could go into the breadcrumbs file path setting. I could turn this off completely so that no file path is going to be shown. It's only going to show the symbols in the current file. Or if I wanted to, I could have the current file, but not the entire file path shown if I go and I change this to be last instead. So now it's going to display the current file, but it's not going to have the entire file path leading up to that file. I'm just going to reset this one as well. Now, similar to the outline view, you can also control what is going to be shown inside of the breadcrumbs. So you have all of these breadcrumb show options here, which are going to control what symbols are actually shown inside the breadcrumbs. If I disable things like constructors, for example, so I'll go here, disable constructors, and now I'm going to go and I'll open my breadcrumbs again with Control-Shift-Period or Command-Shift-Period. You can see that if I expand jump to bracket action, the constructor is not going to be shown. So just like the outline view, you can actually control what is going to be shown inside of the breadcrumbs using these settings. And you can scroll through all of the other settings that are available for breadcrumbs as well. I'm not going to cover all of them here, but you can really customize things using the breadcrumbs view here. So we've just been looking at how you can navigate to symbols within the current file, but you can also jump to symbols within your current project, and that is using the go to symbol in workspace command. So this lets you sort of like quick open, jump to a specific symbol just based on its name. If I, for example, was searching for a class but didn't know what file the class was in, I can use the go to symbol in workspace command to jump to it. To trigger this, I can either use Control-T or Command-T, which is the keyboard shortcut, or I can actually go and open the command palette here and say go to symbol in workspace. Again, you can see the key binding displayed next to it, Control-T or Command-T. When I open this, it is going to ask me for what symbol I want to jump to. I'll say something like code action here. Now it is doing a search of the entire project, and now it is displaying all of these symbols in the workspace that have code action somewhere in their name. So up here at the top, you can see I have classes like code action here. As I scroll through the list, I'll have other matches that have been found here. So the best matches are generally going to be shown at the top, and as I go down on this list, it's going to display matches that are not quite as good. But it's searching through the entire project again. So I could just go through this list and say I want to open the symbol here. I can just press enter or click on it. And now it has actually gone and jumped directly to that symbol in my project. So it's gone to the code action interface here and jumped directly to that. Now, just like quick open, there are a number of other ways that you can interact with this list. So if I press Control-T or Command-T here to open the go to symbol in workspace view and then say code action again, I could also use right arrow to open the file, but not actually close the input box here. So if I go and I press right arrow here, you can see that it's opened the file, but left the input box open. So I can continue browsing through this list and open multiple files this way. So I could go say code action here, right arrow on that, and then code action adapter, and press enter on that. And you can see it's opened all of these files in the background just by using the right arrow key. Now, just like quick open, you can also open symbols to the side of the current editor instead of opening them in the current editor group just by holding down Control. So if I say go to symbol in workspace with Control-T or Command-T here, let's say refactor, for example, and then let's say that I want to open this symbol here, but I don't actually want to close the current file. I want to keep the current file visible. If I hold down Control and then press return or click on this, It will instead open that symbol to the side of the current editor in a new editor group here. And you can see that it's automatically navigated to the refactor symbol here, and the original file group that I had open is remaining over in the left-hand side over here. So I can just hold down Control to open a symbol to the side of my current editor, just like I could with Quick Open. The go to symbol in workspace command is another one that I recommend making part of your workflow because it can really speed up navigation. If you're coming from another editor, you might be used to using text-based search to go and find a specific symbol, but the go to symbol command actually parses the file so that it will find the correct symbols and be more accurate, and it can just be a lot quicker than doing a text-based search. There won't be false positives or that type of thing using the go to symbol in workspace command. Now let's take a look at some of the ways that you can navigate through code based on the current cursor position and the symbol under your current cursor. This includes things like jumping to the definition of the symbol at the current cursor position, or jumping to the implementation of a class. Again, all of these features do require IntelliSense support, so if you're working in a language like JavaScript and TypeScript, you should get this out of the box for VS Code. But if you're working in a language like Python, JavaScript, Java, make sure you have the Java, Python, C#, whatever extension you are working with, make sure you have that language extension installed so that you can use all of these features. And keep in mind that not all of these features will be available for every language. For a language like C++, for example, a command like go to declaration makes sense, but for a language like JavaScript, where there's no such concept of a declaration, or Python, then the go to declaration command is not supported. So do keep in mind that not every action will be supported, even if you have the correct IntelliSense plugin. First up, we have the go to definition command, and this is the command that I find myself using most often. This jumps to wherever a symbol is being defined. So for example here, let's say I see jump to bracket action here in my code, and I'm interested in seeing what the class definition here looks like. I can just put my cursor on that and then open up the command palette with Control-Shift-P or Command-Shift-P and say go to definition. You can see that the default key binding for this is F12. So if I run go to definition here, or I press F12, it'll actually jump to the definition of the symbol that was under my cursor. So you can see it's jumped to where the jump to bracket action class was actually being defined here at the top of the file. Now, if I just go back here with Control minus, it'll jump back to the previous location, and I'm back to where I was before. Now, I can use this to navigate across files as well. So if I go to jump to editor action here, and then press F12, which is the go to definition default key binding, you can see it will jump over into this other file where register editor action is actually being defined. So you can also use jump to definition across files. Now, let's say that I was working in the code and I'm interested in seeing the definition of a symbol, but I don't actually want to open that symbol completely. I just want to get a peek of what that symbol might look like and what its definition might look like. In those cases, I can use the peek definition command. So for that, I'm going to, again, have my cursor on the symbol that I'm interested in, and then I'm going to open the command palette with Control-Shift-P or Command-Shift-P and say peek definition. And the default key binding for this is Option F12 or Alt F12. And when I run this command, you can see that it's opened a little peek window here that is showing the definition itself, but it has not actually gone and opened a new editor. So I'm still in the same editor here. It just is inline open this little peek definition view that I can get a preview of things here. If I wanted to, I could double click into this editor to actually open it up, or I could actually close this editor just by pressing escape here, and I get that nice little inline definition. So you can use peek definition as a nice alternative when you just want to see the definition inline without actually navigating to things. Another useful trick for previewing the definition of a symbol is that you can actually preview that using a hover. So normally when I go and I hover over a symbol in a TypeScript file, for example, so I'll go and hover over select to bracket action here, it'll actually show the type of the symbol. So you can see that this is a class, and the hover in this case is not terribly useful. Now, if I actually wanted more information, I could use the go to definition command to see what this class looks like, or peek definition, or I could actually just see this inline in the hover. So while having the hover open, I'm going to hold down Command or Control on Windows. So this would be Command on Mac, Control on Windows. And then when I do this, you can see that it's actually previewing the inline definition right here in the hover. So here is the actual class definition here, and it is being previewed right in the hover. Now, I don't get a full preview here. It's only going to preview around the first 10 lines or so here, but it is previewing that code. And for short classes or short functions or short definitions, this can be really helpful as well. Now, the hover definition preview also introduces another way that you can navigate through the code and another way that you can run go to definition. So you can run it from the command palette, you can run it with F12, but you can also run it just by clicking. And to do that, I'm going to go and hold down on Mac, it would be Command, on Windows and Linux, it'd be Control, and I'm going to go and hover over the symbol that I'm interested in. So again, holding down Control on Windows and Linux or Command on Mac here. And you can see that when I do this, the symbol that I'm currently hovering over has turned into a link. So it has turned this blue color and is now being underlined. That is indicating to us that I can actually click on this symbol to navigate to it. And as I hover around here, you can actually see the various symbols being highlighted that is indicating that these are links. If I hover over something like if, I do not get a link because there's no symbol to navigate to for that. So as I'm going around here, holding down Control or Command, if I actually want to navigate to one of these symbols, all I have to do is click at this point. So I'm just going to do a click, and now it's actually gone and navigated to that symbol. I find that this can be a lot quicker sometimes if you are just browsing through code and using the mouse. If you're a mouse-heavy user, you can just click on things to navigate through the code, and it feels sort of like browsing hyperlinks when you're navigating through your code base this way. Now, in some cases, there might actually be multiple definitions for a single symbol. For example, here, if I go to the iNotebook service type here, and then press F12 to run go to definition, you can see that it's actually opened a peek view, and that is because VS Code has found multiple definitions for this symbol, and it doesn't know which one we actually mean in this case. So I can use this peek to navigate between the two that it's found, and actually browse between these. As soon as I find the one that I want to navigate to, I can just double click in this peek view, and then we'll actually go and navigate there. But you can actually use settings in VS Code to change this behavior as well. So I'm going to go back to the main thread notebook file that we're in before, and I'm going to open up my settings now with Control comma or Command comma on Mac, and I'm going to say definition multiple, and here I want the editor go to location multiple definition setting here. Now you can see that the default for this is that it will open those multiple definitions in the peek view. If I want to have it instead open the first definition that it finds, I could go and say go to, and then VS Code will go and open the first definition that it finds instead. So here I'll say go to, and now when I go back to iNotebook service and press F12, you can see that VS Code has automatically jumped to the first definition that I've found. Now at the bottom here in the status bar, it is actually showing the total number of symbols that have been found. So it's saying symbol 1 of 2. And if I press F12 again at this point, VS Code will navigate to the next definition. So I could just keep pressing F12 to cycle through these different symbols. But by default, it will now actually go to that symbol instead of opening a peek view. Now, another way to navigate through your code base, which is supported for many languages but not all of them, is go to implementation. And this will jump from an interface or abstract class to wherever that interface or abstract class is being implemented. And again, the specifics of what go to implementation might look like do depend on what language you're working in. So here, for example, in a TypeScript file, I have the iEditor input factory interface. And let's say I was interested in finding all of the implementers of this interface. Again, just like go to definition, I'm going to place my cursor on the interface name itself. And then I'm going to open the command palette with Control-Shift-P or Command-Shift-P and say go to implementations. And here I'm going to run the go to implementations command here. You can see the default key binding defined as well. And when I run go to implementations, it is now listing out all of the implementations in a peek view inside of the current file. So you can see that there are 22 implementations across all of these different files here. I can go and interact with this list. I can browse through the various implementations here. And you can see that all of these classes are implementing this iEditor input factory class or interface. So I can just browse through them. And as soon as I find one that I'm interested in, I can just double click in the peek view itself to actually navigate to things there. The go to type definition command jumps to the type of a given symbol. Now again, this is not supported in every language, and it's a little bit hard to understand without an example, so let's take a look at it in action. Say that I was looking at the underscore editor variable here, and I was interested in learning more about its type. Now I can hover over it to see that it is an iCode editor here in the hover, or I could use go to definition here. So if I place my cursor on editor and then say F12, I can actually see where the type is being defined. And if I wanted to, I could then F12 on the code editor over here. But I can actually save some steps here by using the go to type definition command. So what the go to type definition command would do, when it is run on the variable here, so underscore editor, it would actually jump to the iCode editor type. So we skip the step of going here to the definition and then having to click on iCode editor. Let's go back down here. And I'm just going to go into the command palette with my cursor on the underscore editor variable here. And I'm going to say in the command palette, go to type definition. And when I run this, you can see that it's jumped directly to that iCode editor interface. So it skipped going to the definition again, and we're able to jump directly there. Oftentimes, this is more useful because it provides information about what types would be available on the value that you are looking at. And you can also see the documentation. And if this was a class instead, you'd be able to see all of the implementations of these methods. Again, this is not going to be available in every language, but it is supported out of the box for VS Code in JavaScript and TypeScript. Some languages might also support a go to declaration command, and this one is not supported in JavaScript and TypeScript, so I'm not going to be able to demonstrate it here, but it would be useful for languages like C++, where the declaration of a symbol is different from the definition of that symbol. So where you're like splitting things between a header file and an implementation file, for example, you can use that go to declaration command to really just jump to the declaration, and then you could use the go to definition command to jump to where the symbol is actually being defined. But again, I cannot demonstrate that for JavaScript and TypeScript. Now, let's say that instead of looking at definitions or implementations, you're actually interested in finding other places in your code base where a given symbol is being used. Rather than using text-based search for this, which is going to be pretty inaccurate, you can actually use VS Code's Find All Reference functionality, and that will list off all of the references using language smarts so that you can browse through the references to a given symbol in your code base. Now, the easiest way to use this is I'm just going to put my cursor again on the symbol that I'm interested in. So let's take a look at editor action, for example, here. Now I'm going to open the command palette with Control-Shift-P or Command-Shift-P and say references. And I want the go to references command here. You can see that the default key binding for this is Shift F12. So go to definition was F12 on its own. Go to references is Shift F12 instead. So when I run this, you can see that VS Code has now opened a peek view and is listing off all of the references to editor action. So this would be anywhere in my current project where editor action is being used. So you can see there are 174 references in this peek view. Here are all of the files that are actually using editor action in them. If I'm interested in one of these files, I can just expand it and then actually see the references themselves. So you can see it's being imported up here, and here's where it's actually being used. If I want to go and explore this implementation more, I can just double click into it. And now I've gone and actually opened that file at the reference location. So again, I could just trigger this on any symbol like Shift F12 here. And you can see that I now have all of the references being displayed here, and I can just browse through this list. Now, one of the problems of the go to references command is that it's displaying the references in this inline peek view. Now, that can be really useful if you just have a handful of references, but if you have a lot of references, like the 174 that we have here, then this inline peek view can be a little bit overwhelming, and it can be difficult to actually browse through all of the references. That's where the Find All References command comes in. So I'm going to close the peek view just by pressing Escape here. And now with my cursor on the symbol that I'm interested in, I'm going to again open up the command palette with Control-Shift-P or Command-Shift-P and say, Find All References. So instead of go to references, I'm going to run Find All References instead. And when I run this, you can see that VS Code has opened the references view over here and is displaying the same information, so the same 174 symbols, but is now displayed in this list over to the side. And I can just browse through the file list this way. When I find a file that I'm interested in, I can just expand it and then navigate through all of the references in that file just by clicking around. So this provides an alternative view, and you can interact with this references view over on the side, find the symbols that you're interested in, and then close this whenever you're done with it. Call hierarchies are the most advanced code navigation technique that we're going to be looking at in this video. They let you see where a function or method is being called from and what functions and methods it itself is then calling. So it kind of forms this graph, and you can interact with this graph and browse through it to really explore your code base. Now, support for call hierarchies is still pretty new, but they are supported out of the box for JavaScript and TypeScript in VS Code. And for languages like Java as well, if you install the Java extension, then you do have support for call hierarchies, but they are definitely not supported in every language just yet. Say, for example, we're looking at a method like the show method here, and we're interested in seeing where show is actually being invoked from. I can just place my cursor on show here, and I could use find all references to find all of the references to show, but that might have other false positives where show is just being referenced but not called, and that's where call hierarchies are really useful. So I'm going to put my cursor on show here, then open the command palette with Control-Shift-P or Command-Shift-P and say call hierarchy. So I want calls, show call hierarchy here, and when I run this command, VS Code will open a view over on the left, so it's kind of like the references view that was showing before. And what this is showing, you can see up by the title, it is saying, here are all the callers of the show method. So you can see that there are these two classes, and each of them has a method or function called update, and then code action list here. And those are the two places where show is being called from. If I click on one of these, so I'll click on update here, you can see I've navigated to the update method. And if I scroll down, just looking over in the gutter, you can actually see that here is where show is being called from. So that is the actual call to show, and I was able to go and find that the update method was actually calling that. Now if I go and click on the other entry here, so show code action list, you can see here is the show code action list function here, and here is where it is calling show. So we can just browse through the code this way. Now the neat thing about the call hierarchy view though is that you can then interact with these entries. So let's say that I was now wanting to see where show code action list itself is being called from. I can just click on the little chevron next to it, and now VS Code will show all of the places where showed code action list is actually being called from. So I could go to showed code actions here. And you can see that now in the show code actions method, here is where show code action list is being called from. So I can explore the graph going upwards of all the places that are calling these functions and methods, and then see where all of those functions and methods are themselves being called using this callers of view here. Now, let's say instead I actually wanted to see what the show method here, who it was actually calling out to. If I want to do that instead, I can click on the little call icon over here, and this will flip the direction of the call hierarchy. So I'm going to click on the little phone icon here. And when I do this, it is now showing the calls from. So again, this is looking at the body of the show method here and seeing all of the function calls that occur within the body and creating entries over here. So you can see the first call is get DOM node right here. That is shown in the list here. And if I click on this, I'll actually jump to the definition of get DOM node here, and then I could go and expand this and explore each of these entries itself. So I can go to canceled, for example, and then I could expand canceled if I wanted to. It does not actually call out to any, it just calls the default error constructor here, so there's no entries there. Let's go to get menu actions and see if this one has some entries. So I've navigated to get menu actions. Again, that is being called from the show method here. If I expand this, you can see here are all the functions and methods that get menu actions is itself showing. And again, I can just navigate through this entire list or this entire graph by looking at all the calls that are happening within my code. Again, call hierarchy is definitely a more advanced code navigation feature, and I don't find myself using it all the time. However, the call hierarchy can be a great way to learn a little bit about a code base and understand more about how it is actually structured. Finally, let's wrap things up by taking a look at the go to problem commands. Again, these commands do require language IntelliSense, and specifically they require error reporting for whatever language that you're working in. So here in this TypeScript file, for example, you can see that I have a few different errors in this file, and I can use the go to next problem command to actually navigate between these errors so that I can fix them quickly. Now, here you can see that my cursor is on line 30, for example, and to go to navigate to the first problem here, all I have to do is open the command palette with Control-Shift-P or Command-Shift-P and say go to problem. You can see that I have a few different commands I can run here. The one that I want specifically is the go to next problem in files command here. That is bound to F8 by default. I'll just go and run this. And when I do this, you can see that VS Code has navigated and put the cursor at the problem location. And it's also opened up this inline view that is showing more information about the problem at the current location. So here is a more detailed explanation, a longer explanation of what the problem itself actually is. So we can go and fix this. If I wanted to, I could even trigger a quick fix at this point. So I could go and click on the little light bulb over here, trigger a quick fix. So I'll say change spelling to editor text focus. That looks good. And now I've gone and actually addressed that problem. Now to navigate to the next error, all I have to do is press F8 again. So I can just press F8 at this point after fixing the error, and you can see it's gone and navigated to the next error. Now if I press F8 again, I'll just keep navigating through the different errors in the file here. I can just use F8 to cycle through them. So I'm going to go and fix the different problems here. So I'll fix this one. So change spelling again. And if I wanted to navigate backwards in the file, all I have to do is press Shift and then F8. So if I say Shift F8, it will actually navigate backwards through the file instead of navigating forwards. So you can see I'm at the end of the file here. I'll say Shift F8, and now it's navigated to the first error in the file instead of going to the next error in the file here. I can just navigate through the file or through the errors just like this. I could also use the little chevrons on the problem peak itself. So if I wanted to navigate through the different errors here, I can click on these little chevrons to actually navigate through them. Now let's say that I'm using F8 here, so I'm pressing F8 a few times, and now you can see it's navigating through the various errors in the file here. So I keep pressing F8, it's going to the errors, and as soon as I hit the last error in the file, it'll actually go and cycle to the warnings instead. So now it has the lower priority things that it needs to be fixed. So it's gone up here to the warnings in the file. I could go and fix this warning. It's an ESLint problem here. As soon as I press F8 again, it'll jump to the other warning in the file. And now at this point, as soon as it's gone through the warnings and the errors in the current file, when I press F8 another time, we'll actually jump over to this other file. So you can see it's opened code actions here and it's gone to the next error over in that file instead. Now again, at any point I could use Shift F8 to navigate backwards. So if I just press Shift F8 here, it'll navigate backwards to the other file. And now I'm back in this first one and I can navigate through the errors in this file instead. I find the go to problem commands really useful for cleaning up problems in your code base. You can just go into a file, press F8, fix the problem, press F8 again, and just navigate through the code base until all of the problems have actually been resolved. I hope this video has been helpful and perhaps taught you a few new ways to navigate through your code base. Now, of course, I didn't have time to cover everything, so there's some more advanced VS Code commands like the go to next change or go to previous change commands, which you can use to navigate through source control changes, for example. And if you're working in a specific language, you might have commands that are coming from an extension that can help you with that specific language instead. But I think if you get things like quick open, go to definition, find all references down, that's really 90% of what I'm doing all the time. So when I'm just browsing through the VS Code code base, I'm usually just using those basic commands. And then every so often I'll break out more advanced ones like go to implementation, go to type definition, find all references with the references view, or something like the call hierarchy, for example. So if you have any questions about the contents of this video, just let me know. And if you have any tricks that you use and find especially helpful for navigating through your code, be sure to post a comment so that others can learn from that too. Thanks.